All right, ladies and gentlemen, here we are at lesson 14. We're going to be taking a look at World War II, the lead up to, and then the actual battles of World War II during this unit. We're going to start off with the kind of precursors to World War II. When last we spoke, we were talking about World War I and the Russian Revolution. And we saw in World War I, at the very end, there was a treaty called the Treaty of Versailles that stopped the war and really put an awful lot of punishment on Germany. And this led to a downfall, a really difficult time for about a decade in Germany, at which point a charismatic leader named Adolf Hitler took over with some force and some cunning and was able to start rebuilding the German state and make the German people start to believe in themselves again. Now, he did this with pretty ugly reasons and rationale, as we'll see in this unit. But essentially what happened was Germany was rebuilt. It had been embarrassed in World War I, and with another combination of forces going on in the world, we were ready for another massive world catastrophe. And that's what happens during this time frame. So the reading that you're going to do for this section, for section A, is going to be chapter 26. We're jumping a couple chapters, so watch that. Pages 809 to 822. Okay, so that's the first couple of sections in that particular chapter, dealing with World War II. The key terms I want you to look for this first lesson are appeasement, blitzkrieg, that's a German word, fascism, and partisan. Okay, so you're going to be looking for those as you're doing that reading. So what led to Europe after World War I ended? We kind of got done with all that thing. There were new borders drawn of countries. We had the League of Nations to try to take care of these conflicts. How do we get back to about the same place with about the same countries just 30 years later? Well, a lot of it had to do with the fact that World War I led to a huge amount of power vacuum in the nations of Germany, Austria, and Hungary that had been powerful nations prior to that point. And what happened is that dictators came up and took over, moved away from democracy, and really provided some stability for the people. And we had a number of different types happening. We had something called fascism. Fascism occurred in Italy and Spain. Nazism, which was a type of fascism, which was led by Adolf Hitler in Germany. Communism, as we looked at last time in the last lesson, in the Soviet Union or the USSR. And militarism, kind of rule by the military in Japan. So we have a number of different dictators that are all coming up and looking to expand their particular country. America, however, during the years leading up to World War II, really turns back to neutrality. It moves away from the idea of being a world power. It's kind of done what it needed to do in World War I to help solve that conflict, but now it looks back inside its borders. And that's called isolationism, to isolate oneself. And really we have, one of the reasons that happens is that there's a Nye Commission by a Senator Nye, and that should sound maybe a little bit familiar to you because we have a Nye County just north of us who's named after this individual. This is a Nevada senator who really looked into the U.S. involvement in World War I and was it legal and should we have had anything to do with European problems. It led to a loss of a lot of American lives, and there was a lot of people that thought we shouldn't. And so two acts were passed in 1935 and 1937 called the Neutrality Acts, which essentially prohibited the sale of arms to any nation currently at war. So if there was a nation in the world that was at war, we could not sell some of our advanced weapons to it. And the idea there would be that we would not have an interest in what happened in those battles overseas. But regardless of what the United States wants to do across the Atlantic, we're starting to move towards war in Europe. And a couple of things lead to that. The first is a civil war in Spain. That happens in 1936, the Spanish Civil War. And one of the very first fascist leaders, General Francisco Franco, comes to the fore. And it's really kind of a trial run. It's almost like the JV game for the big varsity game that's going to happen in World War II. A lot of nations send troops, we get to try out new weapons, and it really is, like I say, kind of a trial run for what's to come. We also see some new alliances developing again. So back to the alliance system that led us down the path of ruin in World War I, we see it again. And the main fascist alliance is called the Axis, and Germany, Italy, and Japan are the main power players within that particular alliance. We also have our president of the United States, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, is starting to promote something called internationalism. So moving away from this isolated United States into more of a connected United States, mainly based on trade, and thinking that that's going to be important to pull us out of the Great Depression. So all of these things are happening as we lead up to the war. Also, what's happening as we lead up to the war is that Adolf Hitler is getting more and more bold in Germany. He has rebuilt the German economy, he's rebuilt the German military, and now he's starting to stretch his muscles a little bit and wants to move the borders of Germany out. He takes over Austria. Austria and Germany have always been kind of connected, but they're individual countries, and he essentially kind of annexes Austria in something called the Anschluss. And the European nations start to get very concerned. However, most European nations do not want to go back into a war like they were in World War I, with loss of thousands and thousands of people. So there's a policy of what's called appeasement, and that is to kind of give Germany and Hitler what they want, allow them to kind of stop, and hopefully they won't continue to be aggressive. The main proponent of this is the British Prime Minister named Neville Chamberlain. And in Munich in 1938, even though Germany is preparing for war, they have an agreement that says Germany will stop here and go no further. But then Germany also annexes Czechoslovakia in 1938, and nobody does anything about it. And the final piece that kind of connects with trying to keep Hitler happy is that Germany, the Nazi Empire, and the Soviet Union sign a non-aggression pact in 1939. So Germany's got kind of all of its things in order and ready to go to start its war, even though the rest of Europe really doesn't want to be thinking about that. So what happens to begin World War II? Well, Germany invades sovereign Poland to its east in September of 1939. This triggers Britain and France to declare war on Germany. They have always said, even though they've trying to keep Hitler happy, they've said, if you invade Poland, we're going to declare war on you. Germany, however, is a lot more ready than the other European nations, and it says, fine, bring it on, and it invades France, Belgium, and the Netherlands in 1940, and very quickly goes through those countries, just rips them up and takes them over almost instantaneously. The British have to retreat from France at a place called Dunkirk and get over back to the United Kingdom, and only the fact that the English Channel is there stops the Nazi advance. The Nazis then use a bombing campaign on London and other cities called the Battle of Britain to try to bring England to its knees. Then Germany turns and attacks the USSR. So even though they have an agreement with the USSR, in 1941 they turn and have a battle going in the east. So Germany is fighting in the west and also in the east. And at this point, remember, the US is still neutral. However, even though we are neutral, we are kind of edging our way towards the war. We certainly support the Allies, which is another alliance made up primarily of France and of Britain. And we support them because they're our main trading partners and kind of culturally are connected. However, we have another Neutrality Act of 1939 that wants to keep us out. So the two parts, the main part is the isolationists, the ones that want to keep the United States out of the war. And they develop something called the America First Committee. They say that you really should focus on the people of America before you worry about Europe. Let Europe fight its own battles. We've got problems at home. The election of 1940 is a very close one, although Roosevelt wins it, and that almost sets the table for us getting involved. How we do get involved, though, is we do pass a piece of legislation called the Lend-Lease Act, where weapons are sent to the Allied forces, who would then rent them and return them. So we develop weapons in the United States, rent them to Britain and France with the idea that the Soviet Union, with the idea that we would get those back eventually. However, the United States is still out of the war. But what brings the United States into the war has nothing to do with Germany or even Europe, and it has to do with an attack by Japan on Pearl Harbor, Hawaii in December of 1941. So kind of out of the blue, the Japanese, who are also gearing up for war, and remember are allied with Germany, attack Hawaii, the main base in the Pacific of the United States fleet, and kill over 2,400 Americans. This is the largest single loss of life since the Civil War in the United States, and until September 11th. So this is a huge event, and it starts the United States onto a path of declaring war on Japan. As soon as the United States declares war on Japan, Germany, Japan's ally, declares war on the United States, and we're off and running. So that's a little bit of kind of the lead up to the war. We're going to talk specifically about what's going on in the war next time. But for now, take a look at lesson 14a, that assignment, and we'll talk to you next time.